Hello friends, if I want to watch super hit movie The Smurfs in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, friends, in today's video. The movie we're going to talk about is called The Smurfs. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I am going to tell you, I am also going to give you all the information on which OTT platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about theory story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film, storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. When the brain trust at Sony Pictures Animation decided a few years ago that the Smurfs, the unremittingly chipper cartoon creations of the Belgian artist known as Peyo, were worthy of the big screen treatment, they made the inexplicable decision to present both The Smurfs 2011 and The Smurfs 2 2013 as live-action animation hybrids. The creatures were be rendered as slick CGI creations, voiced by the likes of Katy Perry, John Oliver, and the late, great Jonathan Winters, and interacted with the flesh and blood likes of Neil Patrick Harris, Sofia Vergara, and Hank Azaria. While the two films made money, they didn't exactly engender the kind of audience devotion, even among younger viewers, to warrant continuing down that same path. Therefore, when it came time for the inevitable reboot, the decision was made go for the full animation approach instead. While Smurfs: The Lost Village may not be better or more entertaining, the acknowledgement that it is aiming solely for the kiddie audience this time around at least makes it slightly more palatable than its predecessors. As is seemingly the case of nearly every Smurf project of note, Smurfs: The Lost Village is concerned with the existential plight of Smurfette, Demi Lovato, who is not just the only female Smurf in existence, but the only one whose name doesn't serve as a handy descriptor as to their central purpose in life. Of course, this is because Smurfette is not precisely a Smurf per se, as she was once a piece of clay brought to life by the fiendish Gargamel, Rainn Wilson, as part of one of his plots to snag the creatures and harness their magical powers for his own malevolent purposes. Happily, avuncular Smurf leader Papa Smurf, Mandy Patinkin, yes, Mandy Patinkin, filled her with Smurf magic that turned her from evil to good, and which changed her from a brunette to a blonde, but never mind. One might think that not having your life story mapped out by your name would be a blessing, but this nevertheless sends poor Smurfette into the depths of despair. Of course, being a Smurf, those depths aren't all that deep. Anyway, Smurfette has a breakthrough moment when she wanders a little too close to the wall separating the Smurf village from the Forbidden Forest. She spots what appears to be another Smurf before it disappears through the wall, leaving behind only questions and an oddly colored hat. Since she and her friends are supposedly the only Smurfs in existence, Smurfette is curious and surreptitiously sneaks out, along with friends Hefty, Joe Manganiello, Clumsy Jack McBrayer, and brainy Danny Pudi, to journey into the Forbidden Forest for answers, with both Papa Smurf and Gargamel in pursuit of them. After a journey that not even the most sensitive toddler would describe as harrowing, they stumble upon a veritable lost city of S, where, wait for it, all of the Smurfs are females, with voices supplied by the likes of Ariel Winter, Meghan Trainor, Ellie Kemper, and Michelle Rodriguez. Yes, Michelle Rodriguez, under the watchful eye of Smurf Willow, Julia Roberts. Although wary at first of each other, the two groups learn to work together as a team to fight off Gargamel and save their respective villages. Considering that all a film of this type has to do to be considered a success is hold the attention of a bunch of tykes for 90 minutes, Smurfs: The Lost Village sort of achieves that particular goal. There were no noticeable meltdowns in the audience that I saw it with, but doesn't really try to do much of anything else. The storyline is silly, will seem overly familiar to anyone with even the slightest past exposure to the franchise, and stretches the traditional sad moment before the inevitable happy ending for so long that it may wind up upsetting some of the more sensitive young viewers who haven't grasped that it's all just a story. I must also confess to being a little disappointed by the lack of imagination on display in regards to the new tribe of Smurfs that are encountered. Aside from their gender, which is more of a concept in the Smurf world than anything else, and the color of their hats, there is hardly any difference between them and the more familiar ones. This will presumably prove beneficial to the makers of the merchandise, who can presumably retrofit older models into the new characters with a minimum of time, money, and effort, but won't do a lot for anyone else. That said, I must also confess that even though the film more or less made me itch as a whole, there were a couple momentary diversions. The trek through the Forbidden Forest offers up a number of cheerfully surreal visions that are genuinely striking. Sights such as a glow-in-the-dark bunny rabbit and plants that are essentially eyeballs on stems are rendered in wild color patterns and presented with such wild abandon that they come close to evoking the madness of such old-school animation legends as Max Fleischer and Tex Avery. I also found myself chuckling towards the end when a character is being chased by something and starts yelling out Smurfentine, in obvious homage to one of the high points of the Alan Arkin and Peter Falk classic The In-Laws, 1979. Of course, any review of Smurfs the Lost Village is an exercise in pure futility. If you are old enough to be interested in reading a review of it, you are almost by definition too old for it, and parents just want to be assured that it won't traumatize their young ones. To that end, while I cannot recommend it in good faith, I can assure parents that as a way of keeping the kids occupied for 90 minutes or so, it more or less gets the Smurf job done. The Smurfs is a 2011 American fantasy adventure comedy film based on the comic series of the same name, created by the Belgian comics artist Peyo. It was directed by Roger Gosnell and stars Neil Patrick Harris, Jayma Mays, Sofia Vergara, and Hank Azaria, with the voices of Jonathan Winters, Katy Perry, George Lopez, Anton Yelchin, Fred Armisen, and Alan Cumming. It is the first live-action Sony Pictures animation film and the first of 2 live-action animated Smurfs feature films. After 5 years of negotiations, Jordan Kerner bought the rights in 2002, and the film entered development with Paramount Pictures and Nickelodeon Movies until Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures Animation obtained the film rights in 2008. On a production budget of $110 million, filming began in March 2010 in New York City. The Smurfs premiered at Juice Car on June 16, 2011, and was released theatrically by Columbia Pictures through Sony Pictures releasing on July 29th. Despite negative reviews, the film grossed $564 million worldwide, making it the 9th highest-grossing film of 2011. It was Sony Pictures Animation's highest-grossing film until it was overtaken by Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse in 2023. A sequel, The Smurfs 2, was released on July 31, 2013. Plot: the Smurfs in Smurf Village. The Smurfs are preparing for the Festival of the Blue Moon. Papa Smurf sees a vision of clumsy Smurf reaching for a dragon wand and evil wizard Gargamel capturing the Smurfs. Shortly after, Clumsy leaves to pick Smurfruit and ends up leading Gargamel into the village. The Smurfs flee and Clumsy unknowingly runs toward the Forbidden Falls, with Papa, Smurfette, Grouchy, Brainy, and Gutsy following him. The blue moon appears and creates a vortex that spirits the Smurfs to New York City. Gargamel and his pet cat Azrael follow them. The Smurfs end up in the apartment of Patrick and Grace Winslow, a married couple who are expecting their first child. After they explain their situation, the Winslows befriend them and give them shelter. The next day, needing to find a stargazer, the Smurfs follow Patrick to his workplace at Angelou Cosmetics, believing he is a fortune teller. Meanwhile, Gargamel extracts Smurf essence from a lock of Smurfette's hair, which gives him magic powers. While searching for the Smurfs, he wanders into Angelou and impresses Patrick's boss, Odile, by restoring her elderly mother's youth with his magic. Upon hearing of Patrick's connection to the Smurfs, Gargamel chases him and the Smurfs into Fayot Schwartz, where he steals Leaf Blower and wreaks havoc while trying to catch Smurfs with Leaf Blower. He is arrested and jailed but manages to escape with the aid of a swarm of flies. Papa uses a toy telescope to calculate the night he and the others can return home, but needs to work out a spell first. The Smurfs visit an antique store to look for a spell book and find L'Histoire des Schtroumpfs by researcher Peyo, which contains a spell that can turn the moon blue. Gargamel tracks them down in the store, where he finds the dragon wand from Papa's vision and transfers his magic into it to use it against the Smurfs. Papa entrusts the spell to Brainy and voluntarily stays behind to be captured by Gargamel. After Clumsy convinces the others to rescue Papa, the Smurfs and Patrick travel to Belvedere Castle at Central Park, where Gargamel increases his wand's power with Papa's essence. Brainy successfully turns the moon blue and opens a portal to their world, from where he summons all the Smurfs of Smurf Village. While the Smurfs battle Gargamel, Smurfette and Patrick save Papa. Gutsy steals the dragon wand, but drops it in the process. Clumsy catches it and sends Gargamel flying away. The Smurfs bid Patrick and Grace farewell and return to Smurf Village. During the credits, Patrick and Grace have a baby boy, whom they name Blue, and the Smurfs rebuild their village in the style of New York. Cast live-action actors: Hank Azaria as Gargamel, the arch-nemesis of the Smurfs, who plots to use the Smurfs as part of a spell that would turn lead into gold. As opposed to the television show, where Gargamel's goal is to use the Smurfs as the key ingredient in an alchemical formula to create the gold or eat them or destroy them, in the film he wants to capture them to serve as charms, whose mystical essence will make his inept magic more powerful and dangerous. To look the part of Gargamel, Azaria wore a prosthetic nose, ears, buck teeth, eyebrows, and a wig. To make the process easier, he shaved his head. The initial makeup test took 3 hours, but by mid-production, the process took 90 minutes to complete. Azaria was transformed over 50 times and spent approximately 130 hours in the makeup chair. Neil Patrick Harris as Patrick Winslow, the new VP of Marketing at Angelou Cosmetics and Grace's husband. Jayma Mays as Grace Winslow, Patrick's wife. Sofia Vergara as Odile Angelou, the CEO of Angelou Cosmetics and Patrick's boss. Tim Gunn as Henry, Odile's assistant friend of Angelou Cosmetics. Joan Rivers, Liz Smith, Tom Colicchio, Olivia Palermo, and Michael Musto make cameos in the film at a fictional Angelou Cosmetics product launch. Voice actor. Further information, list of the Smurfs characters. Jonathan Winters as Papa Smurf, the leader of the Smurfs. Winters previously provided the voice of Grandpa Smurf in the 1980s cartoon series. Winters and Frank Welker are the only original cast members from the TV series who returned for the film. Katy Perry as Smurfette, the female of the Smurfs. About gaining the voice role, Perry said, "They had done a blind test where they took certain voices from previous interviews and matched them with the character. They liked my voice without even knowing who it was, and when they found out it was me, they thought that would work out. My personality was just a plus." Anton Yelchin as Clumsy Smurf, the dim-witted but friendly Smurf. Yelchin commented on his character's personality change from the cartoon series, saying, "I was familiar with Clumsy from the TV series, where he had that southern twang. I went back and watched that, and then Raja, Jordan, and I talked about it. We decided to make Clumsy a little simpler, a little sweeter. His voice is pitched higher than my normal speaking voice. It's full of joy, optimism, and enthusiasm for life. Clumsy isn't trying to mess anything up for anybody. He's just clumsy, and actually he's tired of being clumsy." Fred Armisen as Brainy Smurf, the smartest Smurf below Papa Smurf. Quentin Tarantino was up to voice him, but dropped out. Alan Cumming as Gutsy Smurf, one of 3 Smurfs created specifically for the film and who is Scottish, wears a kilt and has sideburns. The character is also described as the action hero of the film. George Lopez as Grouchy Smurf, a Smurf who is always grouchy. To prepare for his role of being grouchy, Lopez did not drink coffee, made sure he had bad breath, and picked the busiest time to get to the studio. Jeff Foxworthy as Handy Smurf, a hardworking Smurf. Paul Rubens as Jokey Smurf, a Smurf who plays pranks on others. Gary Basaraba as Hefty Smurf, a strong Smurf with a tattoo of a heart. John Oliver as Vanity Smurf, a Smurf who is obsessed with his looks. Kenan Thompson as Greedy Smurf, a Smurf who loves Smurfberries. B.J. Novak as Baker Smurf, a Smurf who loves to bake. Joel McCrary as Farmer Smurf, a Smurf who is a farmer. Wolfgang Puck as Chef Smurf, a Smurf who loves to cook. John Cassier as Crazy Smurf, the alarm for the village, and the second Smurf created specifically for the film. Tom Kane as Narrator Smurf, a Smurf with a deep narrator voice, and the third Smurf created specifically for the film. Frank Welker as Azrael, Gargamel's cat, 8. Welker provided the voice of Hefty Smurf and other characters in the 1980s cartoon series. 4 orange tabby cats played the role of Azrael, with some scenes being created with CGI by Tippett Studio. Animal trainer Larry Madrid had a rare Burma cat that was used to adduce snarls from the other cats since they did not like him. Production development. In 1997, producer Jordan Kerner sent the first of a series of letters to the Smurfs licensing agent Lafig Belgium expressing interest in making a feature film. It was not until 2002, after a draft of Kerner's film adaptation of Charlotte's Web was read by Peyo's heirs, that they accepted Kerner's offer. Peyo's daughter Veronique Culliford and family had wanted to make a Smurfs film for years and said that Kerner was the first person to pitch a film that shared their vision and enthusiasm. Kerner soon began developing the 3D CGI feature film with Paramount Pictures and Nickelodeon Movies. In 2006, Kerner said the film was planned to be a trilogy and would explain more of Gargamel's backstory. He stated, "We'll learn more about Gargamel and Smurf soup and how all that began and what really goes on in that castle, what his backstory really was. There's an all-powerful wizard. There's all sorts of things that get revealed as we go along." Early animation footage was leaked on the internet in early 2008. The filmmakers were allowed to create 3 new Smurfs for the film: Narrator, Crazy, and Gutsy. In June 2008, it was announced that Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures Animation obtained the film rights from Lafig Belgium. Kerner said the current project started with Sony during a conversation with the chairman CEO Michael Linton, who grew up watching the Smurfs in the Netherlands. Kerner explained, "He relished them as I do and suggested that it should be a live-action CG film." Amy Pascal felt equally that there was potentially a series of films in the making. Shrek 2 writers J. David Stem and David N. Weiss wrote the screenplay, along with Zookeeper writers Jay Sherrick and David Ron. Stem and Weiss also wrote the story. Raja Gosnell, who previously directed Scooby-Doo and its sequel Monsters Unleashed, directed the film. Quentin Tarantino was in talks to play Brainy Smurf. However, these did not pan out. Filming and animation. On a budget of $110 million, principal photography began in New York City on March 26, 2010. In May, scenes were shot all night for 5 nights in a row at FAO Schwartz Toy Store. Other locations used for filming were Belvedere Castle, the Russian Tea Room, Rockefeller Center, and Brooklyn's Prospect Park. A 2/3 scale replica of the Belvedere Castle was built with wooden grates as floors to create additional contrast. Gargamel's dungeon under the Belvedere Castle, which included the Smurfalator, was built on a soundstage. It took 3 months to build because some parts were hard to come by. Production eventually found the rare parts at garage sales, flea markets, on eBay and Craigslist. The scene where Gargamel escapes from prison was filmed at the Nassau County Correctional Center in East Meadow. In order to help the Smurfs animators during post-production, cinematographer Phil Mahou and his team would light up a scene where the Smurfs would be digitally added using 7 1/2-inch tall models to stand in during setup and rehearsals. He explained, "We can then position the light so that it falls right. The actors know where the Smurf will be when it is animated later, so their eye lines will match. Then we can take out the model and shoot the scene, and they look quite real, fitting the real backing that we're giving them. It looks like they're part of the surroundings." Also during the process, the ImageWorks visual effects team used a new camera system to precisely record the on-set lighting, so it could be applied later in the computer. When time came to film a scene that would include actors and Smurfs, each Smurf was represented by a different colored dot, and the actors had to remember which dot was which Smurf. The Smurfs characters were created during post-production by 268 Sony Pictures ImageWorks employees who spent around 358,000 hours animating. Character designer Alan Bettino, a longtime Kerner collaborator, was brought in to redesign the characters for CGI. Release: the film had its worldwide premiere on June 16, 2011, in Euscar, a small village in Spain. To celebrate the release, the residents painted the entire village, including the church and other historical buildings, in blue. 12 local painters used 4,000 liters of blue to transform the traditionally white Euscar into the world's first Smurf village. Although Sony vowed to restore the village to its former look, 6 months after the premiere, the residents voted to keep the color, which had brought more than 80,000 tourists to Yuskar. The Japanese version of the film uses Heisei Jump's Magic Power as its theme song. A couple of the singers were voice actors in the Japanese dub. In the United States, the film was meant to be released on December 17, 2010, but it was delayed to July 29, 2011. It was then further delayed to August 3, 2011, before being moved up to the original release date of July 29, 2011. Sony teamed up with marketing partners in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom to promote the film through McDonald's Happy Meals and Post Foods brand cereal during the summer of 2011. Home media. The Smurfs was released on DVD, Blu-ray disc, and Blu-ray 3D on December 2, 2011, accompanied with an all-new 22-minute animated short film, The Smurfs: A Christmas Carol. The Smurfs and Friends with Benefits are the first Sony films compatible with the ultraviolet system, which enables users to access films on any web-connected device. The film was re-released on Ultra HD Blu-ray on March 28, 2017. In April 2021, Sony signed a deal giving Disney access to their legacy content to stream on Disney Plus and Hulu and appear on Disney's linear television networks. Disney's access to Sony's titles would come following their availability on Netflix. Reception. Box office. The Smurfs grossed $142.6 million in the United States and Canada, along with $421 million in foreign markets, for a worldwide total of $563.7 million. It was the ninth highest grossing film of 2011. Documents from the Sony Pictures hack revealed the film turned a profit of $83 million, citation needed. It is Sony Pictures Animation's highest-grossing film until it was surpassed by Spider-Man: Across the Spider-Verse in 2023. The film opened on approximately 5,300 screens at 3,395 locations, with 2,042 locations being 3D-enabled theaters. On July 28, 2011, Exhibitor Relations predicted The Smurfs would rank third its opening weekend with $24 million, but analyst Jeff Bach added that the film could be a dark horse and do better than expected. That same day, John Young of Entertainment Weekly predicted a $32 million opening and a second-place ranking behind Cowboys and Aliens. He also stated that the ticket service Fandango reported that the film was leading in ticket sales. The Smurfs came in number one on Friday, making $13.2 million, ahead of Cowboys and Aliens' $13 million. According to Sony's research, 65% of the Smurfs' audience was parents, 40%, and their children under 12 years old, 25%. Overall, the audience breakdown was reported as 64% female and 55% aged 25 years and older. Estimates later showed that Cowboys and Aliens and the Smurfs were tied at the number one spot for the weekend with $36.2 million each. However, actual figures showed Cowboys and Aliens won the weekend with $36.4 million, just beating the Smurfs' $35.6 million. The Smurfs' opening was still stronger than anticipated, since some box office analysts predicted that it would open below $30 million. For its second weekend, the film remained at number 2, with Rise of the Planet of the Apes taking Cowboys and Aliens' spot. It made $20.7 million, 41% being from 3D showings, a 42% decrease from its opening weekend. The Smurfs opened to $4.4 million from 7 territories, with Spain taking in $4 million of that total. On its second weekend, it expanded to 42 territories, taking first place in most of its markets and grossing $45.2 million. Among the markets the film opened in first place were Brazil, $6.65 million, France, $5.93 million, Mexico, $5.53 million, Germany, $5.43 million. The film stayed number 1 at the international box office for the next 7 weeks. Critical reception. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes reports that 21% of 119 critics have given the film a positive review, with a rating average of 4.10. The site's critical consensus states, "The Smurfs assembles an undeniably talented cast of voice actors and live-action stars, then crushes them beneath a blue mound of lowest common denominator kiddie fare." Metacritic, which assigns a weighted average score out of 100 to reviews from mainstream critics, gave the film an average score of 30 based on 22 reviews, which indicates generally unfavorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A- on an A+ to F scale. Keith Staskiewicz of Entertainment Weekly gave the film a D+, saying, "The Smurfs may be blue, but their movie is decidedly green, recycling discarded bits from other celluloid Happy Meals like Alvin and the Chipmunks, Garfield, and hop into something half animated, half live action, and all careful studio calculation." Michael Rechtshafen of The Hollywood Reporter gave the film a negative review, saying, "This numbingly generic Smurf out of water tale is strictly for those who stand closer to 3 apples tall." Ending the review, he said, "Having previously helmed 2 Scooby-Doos and a Beverly Hills Chihuahua, director Raja Gosnell could probably have done this one in his sleep, which is likely where all but the most attentive of caregivers will helplessly find themselves drifting." Roger Moore of the Orlando Sentinel gave it 2 out of 4 stars, saying, "The good news about the big screen 3D version of the Smurfs that's opening at your neighborhood multiplex is that it's not the insipid and some say socialist Smurfs you remember from 1980s TV. He called the slapstick very small kid-friendly and considered the adult-friendly jokes pretty mild stuff." He closed his review saying, "Yeah, the Smurfs are still sickeningly sweet and upbeat. But if you've got kids, it's not nearly as torturous to sit through as you might have feared." Justin Chang of Variety described the film as adorable and annoying, patently unnecessary yet kinda sweet, and calling it a calculated commercial enterprise with little soul but an appreciable amount of heart. He said, "The script does wink knowingly in the direction of attentive adults." San Francisco Chronicle's Peter Hartlaub gave the film a mixed review. He said The Smurfs is a rare movie where the worst parts are in the promos. He called Harris's performance an honest effort in a thankless role, but said that Azaria as Gargamel, hidden under prosthetics, Hank Azaria, compensates for his lack of good lines and repulsive makeup by overacting. He closed his review saying, "Harris, mostly acting against marshmallow peep-sized animated creations, is convincing and likable throughout. No doubt he will poke fun at his participation in this film the next time he's hosting an awards show, but don't be fooled. It takes a good actor to save a bad movie." Ty Burr of the Boston Globe criticized the CGI used on the cat, the use of 3D by calling it needless, and Lopez's voice as grouchy. He called the Smurf rap the worst part of the film. However, Burr echoed Harlaub's praise for Harris's performance by saying, "Harris manages to class up whatever he touches, even if the sight of him repeatedly hitting himself with an umbrella probably won't go on the career highlight reel." About Azaria, he said, "Azaria gets to put on a baldy wig and fake buck teeth and overact as broadly as he can. A little of this goes a long way unless you're 6 years old, which is the point." He also added that Sofia Vergara shares the screenplay's confusion as to what exactly she's doing here. USA Today's Scott Bowles enjoyed Azaria's performance, calling him the human standout and saying he and his distrusting cat, Azrael, steal scenes. He also called Jonathan Winters wonderful as Papa Smurf. Neil Genslinger of the New York Times said Azaria was quite funny. About the film's content, he said, "Those grown-up winks, along with an array of New York locations, make The Smurfs a surprisingly tolerable film for adults. As for their children, well, who knows with kids? But at least the writers have cleverly built in enough Smurfology that today's youngsters will be able to get the basics of the blue universe." Betsy Sharkey from the Los Angeles Times gave the film a negative review, saying, "Director Raja Gosnell starts with the innocents, but then loses his way in trying to pull off the hipster spin the script by J. David Stem, David N. Weiss, Jay Sherrick, and David Ron is shooting for. And there are many good actors wasted as voices, Alan Cumming, Fred Armisen, and Winters among them, and in the flesh, though the greatest disservice is to Azaria." Accolade. New Now Next Awards. Next Must-See Movie nominated. 38th People's Choice Awards. Favorite Animated Movie Voice, Katy Perry nominated. 2012 Kids' Choice Awards. Favorite Movie nominated. Favorite Movie Actress, Sofia Vergara nominated. Favorite Voice in an Animated Film, Katy Perry won. Video Game. The Smurfs, a Nintendo DS video game, was released on July 19, 2011. The Smurfs Dance Party, a Wii video game, was released on July 19, 2011. Sequel. The Smurfs 2. Main article, The Smurfs 2. A sequel titled The Smurfs 2 was released on July 31, 2013. Director Raja Gosnell and producer Jordan Kerner returned, along with all the main cast. New cast includes Christina Ricci, J.B. Smoove, and Brendan Gleeson. In the sequel, Gargamel creates a couple of evil Smurf-like creatures called the Naughties to harness the magical Smurf essence. When he discovers that only a real Smurf can give him what he wants, and that only Smurfette can turn the Naughties into the real Smurfs, Gargamel kidnaps Smurfette and takes her to Paris. Papa, Clumsy, Grouchy, and Vanity return to the human world and seek the help of their friends Patrick and Grace Winslow to rescue Smurfette from Gargamel. Like its predecessor, The Smurfs 2 was met with critically negative reviews and grossing $347 million worldwide against a $105 million budget. Canceled third film and reboot on May 10, 2012, 2 weeks after Columbia Pictures and Sony Pictures Animation announced production of The Smurfs 2, Variety reported that writers Kerry Kirkpatrick and Chris Poach were developing a script for The Smurfs 3, which was set for release on July 24, 2015, and later rescheduled for August 14, 2015. In March 2014, Sony announced that it will reboot the series with a completely computer-animated film. Directed by Kelly Asbury, the reboot titled Smurfs: The Lost Village was released on April 7, 2017, which received mixed reviews from critics but was considered an improvement over the live-action films. Upcoming Nickelodeon animated film reboot. Main article, The Smurfs Movie. In February 2022, it was reported that Leifig Belgium and MPS, now known as Peyo Company, the owners of the Smurfs brand, had agreed to a partnership with Paramount Animation and Nickelodeon Movies to produce multiple animated Smurfs films, with the first project being a musical. Brady was attached to write the screenplay, with production set to begin later that year. The Smurfs have appeared in 5 feature-length films and 2 short films, loosely based on the Smurfs comic book series, created by the Belgian comics artist Peyo and the 1980s animated TV series it spawned. They theatrically debuted in a 1965 animated feature film that was followed by a 1976 animated film titled The Smurfs and the Magic Flute. 28 to 30 years after The Magic Flute was released in the United States, a 2011 feature film and a 2013 sequel were produced by Sony Pictures Animation and released by Columbia Pictures. Live-action roles include Hank Azaria, Neil Patrick Harris, and Jayma Mays, while the voiceover roles include Anton Yelchin, Jonathan Winters, Katy Perry, and George Lopez. A fully animated reboot titled Smurfs: The Lost Village was released through Sony in April 2017. An animated musical film titled The Smurfs Movie, produced by Paramount Animation and Nickelodeon Movies, will release in July 2025. Films produced in Franco-Belgium, Les Aventures des Schtroumpfs, 1965. Main article, Les Aventures des Schtroumpfs. The film consists of 5 black and white shorts made in the previous years for broadcasting on Walloon TV. Smurfnapped, a Smurf gets himself captured by Gargamel. Now the rest of the Smurfs must save him before he gets killed. The Smurfs and the Magic Egg. The Smurfs discover a magic egg, but they don't know it has been created by Gargamel. The Black Smurfs. A contagious disease terrorizes the village. The Smurfs and the Dragon. The Smurfs befriend a domesticated dragon. The Flying Smurf. One of the Smurfs attempt to fly like a bird. The Smurfs and the Magic Flute, 1976. Main article, The Smurfs and the Magic Flute. This story is set at a castle during the Middle Ages. One day a merchant brings musical instruments to sell to Peewit, the court jester. But because Peewit is such a terrible musician, the king throws the merchant out before Peewit arrives. However, he has left behind a flute that only has 6 holes. The king throws it into the fireplace in his room, which starts to emit green smoke. When the fire is put out, Peewit retrieves the flute from the ashes unharmed. He cleans it and starts playing it for the whole castle, realizing that it causes everyone to dance when it is played. That night, a man named Matthew McCreep learns from the merchant that the same flute he had been looking for is at the castle. He heads over to the castle and steals the flute from Peewit. The king sends Peewit and the young knight Johann out to catch McCreep, who uses the flute to rob people of their money. However, McCreep uses the flute to stop them. Johann and Peewit then go to the house of Homnibus the wizard. Using a spell called hypnokinesis, the wizard sends Johann and Peewit to Smurfland, where the magic flute was built. Upon arriving, they meet a Smurf who leads them to the village. Papa Smurf greets the two of them and tells them that they'll make a new flute in order to counter McCreep's flute. The Smurfs head into the forest and chop down a huge tree to get wood from the tree trunk's very center, as only this kind of wood can be useful in crafting a magical flute. Afterward, they celebrate with a party. However, just as Papa Smurf is about to give the flute to Johann and Peewit, the two are warped back to the wizard's house. Homnibus tries the spell again, but passes out from a headache. Meanwhile, McCreep, who has now stolen over 7,000 gold pieces, arrives at the castle of his secret partner, Earl Flatbroke. McCreep tells Flatbroke of his plan to go to an island to hire people for an army to raise war on the king's castle. Fortunately, two Smurfs had been listening to this. Back at the wizard's house, the Smurfs regroup with Johann and Peewit and give them the magic flute. Then they head to the port of Terminac, where McCreep sets sail for the island. However, they are too late. Papa Smurf tells Johann and Peewit about Flatbroke's castle, and Johann comes up with a plan. Flatbroke receives a letter from McCreep written by Johann to come to the island. He heads over to Terminac to board a ship where Johann and Peewit are also on board in disguise, as well as Papa Smurf and 3 others. They head to the island where Johann and Peewit tail Flatbroke. Suddenly, Peewit comes face to face with McCreep, and they both start playing their flutes to each other. They both become exhausted soon after, but Peewit knocks out McCreep with a final note. With McCreep and Flatbroke being brought back to the castle and all the stolen money recovered, Peewit now has 2 magic flutes. Johann tells him that the flutes are dangerous and must be brought back to the Smurfs, but Peewit begins to carve a phony flute to give to them instead. At the castle, Johann and Peewit give the flutes back to the Smurfs, and after they leave, Peewit starts playing the flute, only to realize to his horror that it has no effect on the townsfolk. It is the fake flute he had made. Films produced in America, Sony Pictures Animation Films, 2011 to 2017. The Smurfs, 2011. Main article, The Smurfs film. The Smurfs is a 2011 live-action animated comedy film and the first computer-animated film in the series, directed by Roger Gosnell. In their race to escape the malevolent wizard Gargamel, the little blue forest dwellers find themselves suddenly transported to Central Park. Now stuck in a world populated by towering giants, the Smurfs must find a way to elude Gargamel and find a way back to the village they call home. The Smurfs 2, 2013. Main article, The Smurfs 2. A sequel titled The Smurfs 2 was released on July 31, 2013. Director Roger Gosnell and producer Jordan Kerner returned, along with all of the main cast. New cast members include Christina Ricci, J.B. Smoove, and Brendan Gleeson. In the sequel, Gargamel creates a couple of evil Smurf-like creatures called the Naughties to harness the magical Smurf essence. When he discovers that only a real Smurf can give him what he wants, and that only Smurfette can turn the Naughties into real Smurfs, Gargamel kidnaps her and takes her to Paris. Papa, Clumsy, Grouchy, and Vanity return to the human world and seek the help of their friends Patrick and Grace Winslow to rescue Smurfette from Gargamel. It was Jonathan Winter's final film after his death on April 11, 2013. Canceled third live-action animated film. By May 10, 2012, just 2 weeks after production of The Smurfs 2 was announced, Sony Pictures Animation and Columbia Pictures had already been developing a script for The Smurfs 3, with writers Carrie Kirkpatrick and Chris Poche. Hank Azaria, who played the live-action Gargamel, said that the third film might actually deal with the genuine origin of how all these characters ran into each other way back when. In March 2014, Sony announced that, instead of a third live-action film, it would be rebooting the series with a completely animated film. Smurfs: The Lost Village, 2017. Main article, Smurfs: The Lost Village. Smurfs: The Lost Village is a 2017 American animated fantasy adventure comedy film produced by Sony Pictures Animation and the Kerner Entertainment Company for Columbia Pictures. Kelly Asbury was hired to direct the animated film. Exploring the origins of Smurfs, the comedy adventure features a new take on the characters with designs and environments more closely following the artwork created by Peyo. The film was initially set to be released on August 14, 2015, but in May 2014, the film's release date was pushed back to August 5, 2016. In January 2015, The Hollywood Reporter reported that Mandy Patinkin was in final negotiations to voice Papa Smurf in the film. 2 months later, the release date had been pushed back to March 31, 2017, in order to work on a story that was not fully in the place and take advantage of the Easter weekend. On June 14, 2015, Sony Pictures Animation revealed Get Smurfy as title of the film. In addition to Patinkin, Demi Lovato was cast as Smurfette and Rainn Wilson as Gargamel. The film was ultimately released on April 7, 2017 to mixed reviews, but was seen by both critics and audiences as an improvement over the live-action films. Paramount Pictures Films, The Smurfs Movie, main article, The Smurfs Movie. On February 7, 2022, it was reported that Lafig Belgium and Emps, the owners of the Smurfs brand, had agreed to a partnership with Paramount Animation and Nickelodeon Movies to produce multiple animated Smurfs films, with the first project being an animated musical film. Pam Brady is set to write the screenplay, with production set to begin later that year for release on December 20, 2024. On June 14, 2022, it was announced that former DreamWorks Animation veteran Chris Miller would direct the musical film. In August, it was delayed to February 14, 2025, with Sonic the Hedgehog 3 taking its previous release date. On April 27, 2023 at CinemaCon, it was announced that Barbadian singer Rihanna would be voicing Smurfette, as well as producing the film, along with writing songs for the movie. The title was reported to be The Smurfs Movie. Later, it was renamed as The Smurfs Musical. The title was officially revealed as The Smurfs Movie during CinemaCon in April 2024, alongside Nick Offerman, Natasha Lyonne, J.P. Karliak, Dan Levy, Amy Sedaris, Nick Kroll, James Corden, Octavia Spencer, Hannah Waddingham, Sandra Oh, Alex Winter, Billy Lord, Zolo Maradueña, Kurt Russell, and John Goodman joining the voice cast. On October 4, 2024, the film's release date was delayed to July 18, 2025. Short films, The Smurfs, A Christmas Carol. Main article, The Smurfs, A Christmas Carol. A Christmas television special titled The Smurfs, A Christmas Carol was released on DVD on December 2, 2011, attached to The Smurfs. The Smurfs, The Legend of Smurfy Hollow. Main article, The Smurfs, The Legend of Smurfy Hollow. The Smurfs, The Legend of Smurfy Hollow is a 22-minute animated Halloween television special based on the Washington Irving short story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. It premiered on June 11, 2013 at the Annecy International Animated Film Festival and was released on DVD on September 10, 2013, followed by a TV premiere in October. It was directed by Stephen Frank, and it features the voices of Melissa Sturm, Alan Cumming, Fred Armisen, Anton Yelchin, and Hank Azaria. Like the first special, The Legend of Smurfy Hollow combines computer-generated animation and traditionally hand-drawn animation, with the latter provided by Duck Studios. The Smurfs are a village of little blue people who are being hunted down for their magical essence by the evil wizard Gargamel, but try their best to live in peace during the Blue Moon Festival. When Gargamel begins chasing down the Smurfs after finding their village, a group of them, led by Papa Smurf, end up jumping through a portal to escape. Said portal takes them to New York City, where they meet marketing executive Patrick Winslow. When filmmakers don't know how to adapt a source material into a feature film, they tend to use this uninspired formula. Send them to an American city, always usually New York, where they must avoid or escape a villain, and make them interact with humans. Rather than being about the Smurfs' imaginative world, this film focuses more on the cliché joke of, haha, these alien creatures don't understand human culture. They're so silly. As usual for a family film about a workaholic father, soon to be in this case, the film guilts Patrick for not putting his family or the fantastical characters before his job, when really he needs his job to support his loved ones. Yes, your family is special, but without an income, you can't exactly feed and shelter them. So this message comes off as naive. His own wife, who may show concern for husband's job, actually says that the Smurfs are the bigger picture. When he is stressing over possibly being fired, as if the little blue people are a larger concern than their livelihood. Yes, the film is clearly trying to make the Smurfs be an analogy for Patrick's baby, but it's an unfair comparison. The Smurfs have invaded his life and are making him to put their dilemma before his career, while a baby is something Patrick has planned out with his family in advance. Patrick's baby will be important, but he shouldn't be expected to drop his work duties for the infant unless it's an extreme medical emergency, of course. You can't safely raise a baby on the streets. The Smurfs themselves are very aggravating, constantly moving or talking, each having the energy of a cheetah on Red Bull, always using Smurf as a pun for everything, a joke that's not even funny the first time it's used. I never felt enamored by them because they are more annoying than charming. It doesn't help that they all have the limit of being stuck in one-trait personalities, their names defining their only identity as characters. Such a lack of dimension doesn't make for creatures I can enjoy watching for almost 2 hours. Even Papa Smurf, the most laid-back of the Smurfs, is hard to like. Why? At the start of the film, he learns of a prophecy that involves all the Smurfs ending up in Gargamel's cages, but he hides this information under the belief that he's protecting them. This makes the Smurfs way too confident and relaxed about their predicament, each assured that things will pan out fine, when really, they should be taking things much more seriously. The film does attempt to make clumsy Smurf have an arc, trying to prove that the other Smurfs shouldn't undermine him due to his accident-prone nature, but he makes no effort to learn self-coordination throughout the film. He just whines that he's never included, then suddenly he gets to do something right in the finale. Character development? What's that? Why couldn't he have learned a sport from Patrick? Or maybe someone could have built him a mini gymnastics stage. He's not allowed to join the action anyway. Why not help him improve in this time? I can't blame the other Smurfs for not letting him help them because his track record of accidents outnumber his efforts to grow. Gargamel isn't much of a fun villain. Most of his humor is based on gross-out jokes. He is easily distracted, he rambles unfunny monologues, and he isn't even scary or menacing once he has power. Kids might laugh at him getting hurt or giggle at him making pee jokes, but he's far from a well-written antagonist. Parents being forced to watch the film will just roll their eyes at him. Although, fair play to Hank Azaria for trying his best to bring Gargamel into live action, he is attempting to recreate the character. It's just a shame that the film has no idea what to do with him most of the time. Don't get me started on all the product placement in this film. There's constant excuses to advertise things in this movie, which is disgustingly crude when the target audience is so young. From an excuse to film a scene in a toy store to a whole scene dedicated to the Guitar Hero. It's utterly shameless how this film puts commercial opportunities before telling a meaningful story with good faith. I tried to fairly find something good about this film, but it's a real challenge when there's not enough sincerity behind the film to compliment. I guess that the voice actors are well cast, each one doing decent jobs portraying their assigned personality, even if their characters have as much depth as a puddle in a dry dessert. Neil Patrick Harris, who is obviously only here for a check, does try to bring his trademark charm to Patrick. Patrick's wife Grace does have a sweet girl-to-girl bond with Smurfette too. I can imagine little girls in the audience resonating with their relationship, mainly those who feel like they struggle to find other girls to befriend, maybe because they're surrounded by boys or lack the confidence. That's the thing too. I may dislike Grace's insistence that the Smurfs are more important than anything, but she is a nice lady with a kind and maternal nature. This movie is as cynical as they come. I heard it was bad, but I think I underestimated how bad it would be. Maybe because I had a small glimmer of hope. The Smurfs is a ruse to advertise toys and candy to kids under the guise of being a tribute to the classic comics by Peyo. It's a film that exploits its young audience and the legacy of an artist who charmed generations. Movie review. The Smurfs is one of the safest, non-offending children's films I have seen in a long, long time. It hardly evokes a reaction due to the fact it doesn't even try to evoke a reaction. Outside of a couple of funny one-liners, a bit of fun had with Hank Azaria as Gargamel and the annoying la 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 of the little CG Smurfs, there's nothing to take away. Utilizing the narrative last used by Disney's Enchanted, we begin in a land of fantastical beings. In this case, we meet the Three Apples High Smurfs as they go about their daily lives, hidden in the forest from the evil wizard Gargamel, who wants to capture them and extract their Smurf essence. Yeah, this film is rife with innuendo, and become the most powerful wizard in all the land. Problem for Gargamel is he can't find their mushroom village. Not his fault. It's protected by Papa Smurf's invisibility shield. Boom. Score one for the Smurfs. Fortunately for Gargamel, there's Clumsy Smurf, voiced by Anton Yelchin, who accidentally leads the wizard back to the Smurf village while he's out picking some Smurf root. The resulting chase scene ends in a wet and wild ride through a magical portal that sends Papa Smurf, Jonathan Winters, Gutsy Smurf, Alan Cumming, Brainy Smurf, Fred Armisen, Grouchy Smurf, George Lopez, Clumsy Smurf, and the ever-so-tantalizing Smurfette, Katy Perry, to Central Park. But watch out! Gargamel and his cat Azrael are right behind them, and the chase continues throughout Manhattan as Papa searches for a way home and Gargamel searches for Smurfs. Smurfin' nuts? Am I right? The Smurfs ultimately end up in the hands of Patrick and Grace Winslow, played by Neil Patrick Harris and Jayma Mays, the latter of which for some reason has a problem speaking like an adult. As for Patrick, he was just handed the executive advertising position at a cosmetics company, which is run by a tyrant played by Sofia Vergara, Modern Family, and you better believe he's on a deadline for a new campaign. 48 hours? What the what? I wonder if Clumsy will mess things up, or will Patrick learn a valuable lesson, or both? The tension is killing me. So the whole group, Smurfs, wizards, and humans, runs around the city in search of whatever they may need to keep the plot moving forward, all while posing for advertising tie-ins for the likes of Blu-ray and the Blue Man Group, because Smurfs are blue and it's free money, as well as Wacom, Guitar Hero, FAO Schwartz, and M&M's, again, free money. When the product placement stops, Gargamel points out how Papa Smurf has 99 sons and 1 daughter, and sarcastically adds, "Yeah, because that's not weird." Patrick points out that just because the Smurfs are named after their most dominant trait, it doesn't mean that's all they are, and Smurfette stands over a vent, which results in her dress going over her head. No pervert, they don't show it. So if you thought you would be walking into a film without deep morality lessons, guess again. Still, having said all that, The Smurfs is a movie that's just as impossible to hate as it is to like. In fact, it's too safe to have any real feelings toward. The curious thing is, how do you judge such a movie? With recent kid fare such as Mr. Popper's Penguins and Zookeeper, there was plenty to harp on. The Smurfs doesn't fall into the cliched traps of stupidity those films mind, but that's only because it seems to be actively avoiding them to the point it does absolutely nothing to offend or entertain. Smurfs director Raja Gosnell is probably best known for bringing Scooby-Doo to the big screen and seems destined to hack out similar features for the rest of his career. His last film before this was Beverly Hills Chihuahua, a film more along the Popper's Penguins and Zookeeper lines. By comparison, it seems with the Smurfs, he finally decided that if he can't make a film that will please everyone, he'll make one that won't please anyone, and he'll do it in such a way you hopefully won't have too many bad things to say. Success. In the end, it's a movie titled The Smurfs, and it delivers on its title's promise. There are Smurfs in this Smurfin' thing, but if a Smurf is in a movie and nobody cares to Smurf it, did it really Smurf, and is it really a movie? Here's an alarming fact. Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel, is the 116th most successful film of all time. That's after you've adjusted for inflation and before you factor in DVD sales, video game spin-offs, and merchandising. So the story of 3 preteen cartoon beatboxing rodents is 3,707 places higher up the chart than Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. Advances in CGI have meant that inserting comic strip favorites into live-action flicks is now a cheap, often horrifically cheerful way of making a film. Even the duds turn a buck, from the Bill Murray-voiced Garfield, plus follow up A Tale of Two Kitties, to last year's Yogi Bear 3D with Justin Timberlake as Boo Boo. But it's the man behind Scooby-Doo and Scooby-Doo Monsters Unleashed to whom Sony have handed the reins on the first in a planned trilogy. Yep, trilogy, starring the turquoise titches first drawn by Belgium artist Peyo and then turned into an animated TV series recently voted the 97th best of all time. The plot sticks to a template familiar from the likes of Elf and Enchanted. After a preamble in fairyland, our heroes are plunged down a wormhole into contemporary New York and then pursued by an evil wizard and his daft sidekick. They try to work out a way home while under the initially reluctant foster care of a beleaguered workaholic, who the little tinkers wind up teaching a valuable lesson about the real meaning of friendship. Sitcom star Neil Patrick Harris and his pregnant wife, played by Glee's Jayma Mays, are great bait casting for liberal mainstream parents, and the pair acquit themselves with as much dignity as you can while mugging at a loo brush on which a Smurf will later be digitally grafted, or feigning tickles as they wriggle round beneath your shirt. Hank Azaria as arch-foe Gargamel is a cut above, embracing the panto soliloquy with a relish that might cause Brian Blessed to blush. Other than that, it's pretty unstarry. Save for Joan Rivers' one-line cameo, the biggest name may just be Alan Cumming, who voices a Smurf created especially for the film, Gusty, which translates as vaguely pervy and Scottish. The Smurfs, then, spools along without drama, with enough noise and neon to distract under-8s for an hour and a half. Its sole claim to fame may turn out to be as the most slyly foul-mouthed children's film yet made. The screenwriters, perhaps feeling frustrated by a set of characters pigeonholed at the moment of their christening, have really run with the Smurf quirk of using the word Smurf in place of almost any other. Thus we're treated to lines like, "I think I just smurfed in my mouth," "Son of a Smurf, where the Smurf are we?" and "Up Smurf Creek without a smurfing paddle," plus the immortal Smurf happens. They even go so far as to make reference to the curious fertility of Papa Smurf, 99 sons, 1 daughter, no visible wife. Those anticipating a blue movie won't be disappointed. Sure, Smurfs are blue, but who knew that they actually work blue? The funniest moments in The Smurfs, a new 3D movie featuring the old gang familiar from the 1980s television series, are either raunchy or scandalous, as much as that is possible in a half-animated film with a PG rating. There's a scene in which a Scottish Smurf in a kilt recreates the Marilyn Monroe subway grate display. There's a rude bit involving a portable toilet. Those grown-up winks, along with an array of New York locations, make The Smurfs a surprisingly tolerable film for adults. As for their children, well, who knows with kids? But at least the writers have cleverly built in enough Smurfology that today's youngsters will be able to get the basics of the blue universe. Fleeing their archenemy, the evil wizard Gargamel, Hank Azaria, who is quite funny, a half-dozen Smurfs are sucked through a wormhole and into New York City, with Gargamel and a nasty cat in hot pursuit. Neil Patrick Harris and Jayma Mays play the young couple who befriend the Smurfs. It's somehow depressing that the story centers on whether Mr. Harris's character can come up with an advertising campaign that will sell cosmetics, and the movie frequently reminds us that the gimmick of little creatures scurrying about in the human world, Toy Story, Romeo and Juliet, is pretty worn out. But on a hot summer day, The Smurfs is a decent enough excuse to haul the little ones into an air-conditioned theater. While hardly sophisticated enough to transcend its strictly for kids designation, the script, credited to 4 writers, does wink knowingly in the direction of attentive adults. An early scene in which Gargamel calls out the kink factor of having 100 Smurfs but only 1 Smurfette, Katy Perry, is funny enough that one wishes it were longer. But apart from having characters comment regularly on how irritating the Smurfs' ubiquitous theme song is, the pic keeps its self-parodying instincts mostly in check. More time is spent espousing earnest, family-friendly lessons about the importance of embracing adventure, realizing your self-worth, and, in one unexpectedly touching tete-a-tete between Patrick and Papa Smurf, being a good dad. As directed by Raja Gosnell, by now a dab hand at blending CGI critters with live-action settings, Beverly Hills Chihuahua, the Scooby-Doo pics, The Smurfs hits its life-affirming, mall-wrecking beats with practiced polish and nary an objectionable or unpredictable moment. The fact that the Smurfs are fantastical beings from a parallel dimension does allow the film's animation VFX crew to get away with some less than seamless integration work. A scene in which Patrick embraces the little blue guys brings new meaning to the term awkward hug. Still, Harris and Mays make appealing enough human anchors, and Azaria's high camp wizard, when battling his Smurf adversaries, always seems to be interacting with characters rather than blue screens. As with the big screen versions of Alvin and the Chipmunks and Yogi Bear, the addition of texture and dimension, here in the form of bright blue eyeballs and pastel light skin tones, winds up compromising some of the low-rent charm that made the characters appealing in the first place. These Smurfs grow on you, to be sure, though less endearingly than their comic strip prototypes, briefly glimpsed in one self-referential sequence. The eye-tickling 3D enhancement is most apparent in the Smurf-sucking portal and an opening tracking shot through the enchanted forest. Some additional musical backing, such as the classical pieces often used in the TV show, would not have been unwelcome. The Smurfs is so smurfing sweet that you'll want to smurfing puke all over the smurfing place. I'm not going to make excuses. I knew exactly what I was getting myself into when I made the conscious decision to go see the Smurfs. Somehow I deluded myself into thinking that it might be fun, and even kind of subversive if handled right. After all, I loved the Smurfs as a child. I watched the cartoon. I had this sing-along record that I absolutely adored called The Smurfs All-Star Show, and I'm pretty sure that I had a Smurfs pillowcase. The point I'm trying to make is that I've had a special place in my heart for those little blue fuckers for most of my adolescent and adult life. Yeah, that's gone now. Just poof, disappeared, vanished into thin air. Any residual nostalgia, any fond, lingering memoirs are just that, memories. Thanks a lot, Smurfs. Thank you for killing yet another treasured piece of my youth. I'll bury that shit right next to G.I. Joe, Transformers, Santa Claus, and Daredevil. The Smurfs is exactly as bad as most of you, at least those of you out there capable of rational thought, expected it to be. You know the basics. Smurfs, the brainchild of Belgian drug user Peyo, are 3 apples high, inhabit a magical forest, and live in giant psychedelic mushroom houses. There are 99 dude Smurfs and only 1 woman, which is creepy. All of them, except Smurfette, the lone lady, and Papa, the patriarch, are named after their dominant personality trait: greedy Smurf, vanity Smurf, passive-aggressive Smurf, not making that one up, incontinent Smurf, that one I did make up. You get the idea. They are hunted by a crazed, incompetent wizard named Gargamel, who wants to steal the Smurf's essence, which will give him great power. In this story, everything is peachy keen in Smurf Village. Gargamel, played with over-the-top glee by Hank Azaria, is an idiot and easily fooled. But oh no, Papa Smurf, voiced by Jonathan Winters, who I legitimately thought was dead, has a Smurf-apocalyptic vision that clumsy Smurf, Anton Yelchin, inadvertently helps create. Clumsy being, well, the clumsy one, Smurfs up and leads the evil wizard right to Smurf Village. Through a series of events you don't give a Smurf about, 6 Smurfs, Papa, Clumsy, Smurfette, Katy Perry, Brainy, Fred Armisen, Grouchy, George Lopez, and Gutsy, Alan Cumming, get sucked through a magical hole and wind up in New York City. There they meet Patrick Winslow, Neil Patrick Harris, and his pregnant wife Grace, Jayma Mays. Patrick is a middle management type advertising exec at a cosmetics firm, and he has a chance to make it to the big time if only he can get this ad campaign done on time. As you can imagine, the Smurfs throw a monkey wrench into his plans. Gargamel teams up with Patrick's shark of a boss, Odile, Sofia Vergara, and Patrick has to help the Smurfs get home, save his job, and keep his wife from realizing that he's a complete smurfing tool. Of course, along the way, the Smurfs are going to teach Patrick a thing or two about what is really important in life, like love, friends, loved ones, hugging and kissing, and love. Did I mention that? And cuddles and puppy dogs and moonbeams and shit. Like I said, if you do get dragged to this, bring a barf bag because you're going to need it by the end. It's so sickly sweet, it's like power-chugging Kool-Aid cut with chocolate syrup. Obviously, the Smurfs is aimed at children. You'll be amazed how many times little blue dudes stabbing a wizard in the ass can make a child laugh, but it also attempts to be one of those kids' movies that adults will like too. There is the constant use of the word Smurf in place of curse words, but the intent is readily apparent. It's like swearing by proxy and without any of the impact of proper profanity. And let me see, there are references to Lethal Weapon. Papa's too old for this Smurf, Braveheart, Brokeback Mountain, and Midnight Cowboy, as well as an MMA joke and an ass-licking joke. You'll also cringe when the Smurf crew, with NPH shredding on the axe, reenacts Walk This Way by Run DMC. Yep, that happens. It is not okay. But outside of a few jokes and asides, the Smurfs doesn't do anything to play with conventions or actually make the movie anything but stale. The plot plays out exactly like you know it will, down to Clumsy's accident that puts Patrick's job in jeopardy, but that we know in advance will ultimately benefit him. The story is so incredibly by the book, it feels like they wrote the script on the spot while filming. One of the most curious elements of the Smurfs 3D is the weird fatherly bonding between Papa Smurf and soon-to-be Father Patrick, who spends a fair amount of his time in a CBGB t-shirt, which is a strange juxtaposition. You get the distinct impression that Patrick doesn't want to be a father, and I suspect he has considered trying to escape through some magical whirling hole of his own. But Papa ain't having none of that. He schools Patrick proper until he's stoked that he's about to have a rugrat running around, smearing crap into the carpet, yanking on his basset hound's ears like he didn't make a horrible, horrible mistake. The Smurfs is a constant, bubbly stream of positive affirmations, aw shucks you're good enough just the way you are encouragement, and reminders that you really should believe in yourself above all things. It is the most oversimplified, single-note message you'll ever see in a movie. Sure, I feel like a dick trashing a kid's movie, but damn, even as a child I would have seen through this nonsense. Whether the off-color wordplay makes you cringe for fear that the kids will actually get the joke, or the La 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 song haunts your nightmares, this animated live-action hybrid is really more 3D disaster than family comedy. Even Neil Patrick Harris, who has proved he can save just about any sinking ship, see primetime awards shows such as the Emmys or Tonys, cannot make this boat float. The film is based on characters that began life in the 1950s in a comic book by Belgian artist Peo Culliford, with the little blue gnome-like softies eventually turning up in lots of different media, including a Saturday morning TV run that turned them into a mini phenom here. Like Snow White's dwarfs, the Smurfs were defined by their traits, with their appeal a blend of silliness and innocence that very young kids in particular were charmed by until a big purple dinosaur distracted them. Director Raja Gosnell starts with the innocence, but then loses his way in trying to pull off the hipster spin. The script by J. David Stern, David N. Weiss, Jay Sherrick, and David Ron is shooting for. Neither the movie's sensibility nor its shortfalls come as much of a surprise, since Gosnell has been carving a niche in the world of family comedies for a while now. Many of them involve digitally enhanced animal antics, and none of them have been particularly creatively compelling. Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo 2, and Beverly Hills Chihuahua, for example, and he stays the course. It all begins in Smurfland, a cloying, saccharine, sun-drenched world of singing and dancing, and virtually no discord, except for the few lumps that come from being too close to Clumsy, voiced by Anton Yelchin. Oh, and there is that nasty wizard Gargamel, a real Hank Azaria, though my guess is he's hoping with the makeup you won't recognize him, on the other side of a permeable sort of invisible wall, who's obsessed with getting some Smurf essence. Things might just rock along with the Smurfs singing on one side of that wall and Gargamel fuming on the other, but there's a blue moon rising. It's mainly just a plot device to help get the Smurfs from there to here, as in New York City, with Gargamel and his weird special effects cat with attitude in hot pursuit. In the city, the Smurfs are soon tangled up with Patrick, Harris, and Grace Jama Mays, a young couple about to be parents. He's got career issues and an ad campaign to come up with. She's just dew-eyed lovely, but a little worried about him. Soon enough, their conflicts center around how to help the Smurfs make it back home and what lessons they can learn from Papa Smurf, Jonathan Winters. After Papa booby-traps Gargamel, flinging him in the air, the Smurfs flee, and Clumsy unknowingly runs for the Forbidden Falls, with Papa, Smurfette, Grouchy, Brainy, and Gutsy following him. The blue moon appears and creates a vortex that spirits them to modern-day New York City. Gargamel and his pet cat Azrael follow them. The Smurfs end up in the apartment of Patrick and Grace Winslow, a married couple who are expecting their first child. After they explain their situation, The Winslows befriend them and give them shelter. The next day, needing to find a stargazer, the Smurfs follow Patrick to his workplace at Angelou Cosmetics, believing he is a fortune teller. Meanwhile, Gargamel extracts Smurf essence from a lock of Smurfette's hair, which gives him magic powers. While searching for the Smurfs, he wanders into Angelou and impresses Patrick's boss, Odile, with his magic by restoring her elderly mother's youth. Upon hearing of Patrick's connection to the Smurfs, Gargamel chases him and the Smurfs into F.A.O. Schwartz and causes chaos while trying to catch them. He is arrested and jailed, but manages to escape with the aid of a swarm of flies. Papa uses a toy telescope to calculate the night he and the others can return home, but needs to work out a spell first. The Smurfs visit an antique store to look for a spell book and find L'Histoire des Schtroumpfs by researcher Peyo, which contains a spell that can turn the moon blue. Gargamel tracks them down in the store, where he finds the dragon wand from Papa's vision and transfers his magic into it to use it against the Smurfs. Papa entrusts the spell to Brainy and helps the others escape before he voluntarily stays behind to get captured by Gargamel. Now it's up to the Smurfs and the Winslows to defeat Gargamel and rescue Papa. The story is a complete farce, as while it does have a couple of small things going for it, like a few decent jokes and the opening being a little promising, but once it gets to the portal, that's where it all goes downhill, as the movie pretty much becomes a rip-off of Enchanted, only with none of the charm that made that film enjoyable, and the lack of charm and genuine heart is accompanied by some very bad and cringy humor, needless attempts to look hip and cool, tons of tired tropes and cliches, and not to mention it really fails to capture the heart and charm that made the comics and other adaptations like the Hanna-Barbera series so beloved. The humor in this movie is mostly really bad, as while there are a couple of decently funny jokes sprinkled in, the majority of the humor really falls flat on its face, as it relies on unfunny, gross-out humor, cringy pop culture references, and weak attempts at gags and slapstick. The movie also really lacks any sort of heart or charm, as any attempts to have a tender or charming moment not only feels contrived and cliched, but they're also overshadowed by the bad comedy. The production design of the movie is actually not too bad, as it does look pretty good and does show its value, with the sets and set pieces being pretty well built and having a great amount of detail. The actual filming locations featured are pretty well utilized, and the costumes, makeup, and clothing are pretty well crafted. The animation and special effects are a mixed bag, as while there are some things going for it, like the animation for certain characters like the Smurfs and Azrael, in which the latter does also have a pretty good design in the case of the Smurfs themselves, while the designs themselves aren't all that bad. What ruins them is their faces, as they make the Smurfs look ugly and uncanny. It's kind of like how the faces of the Ninja Turtles in the Michael Bay films distract from the rest of the designs. But other than that, the other effects in the film are okay, like all the magic and stuff. The characters are all pretty weak, as they're all either very bland, uninteresting, or too over the top, like the Smurfs themselves, with Papa, Smurfette, Brainy, Gutsy, Grouchy, and Clumsy, who's the main protagonist for some reason, Patrick and Grace, and even Gargamel, as while he was a pretty goofy villain in the comics and the show, he was still pretty enjoyable. But here, he's too goofy and over the top to the point he comes off as very awkward. If anything, the best character in the movie is the cat Azrael. The acting in this movie is mostly just kinda alright, as the actors do give some decent performances despite the material given, like Jonathan Winters as Papa, Katy Perry as Smurfette, Anton Yelchin as Clumsy, Fred Armisen as Brainy, Alan Cumming as Gutsy, George Lopez as Grouchy, Neil Patrick Harris as Patrick, and Frank Welker as Azrael. As for Hank Azaria as Gargamel, I'm sure he was trying his best, but his performance is way too goofy and over the top. Also, the film wastes the potential of other voice actors, as they're just reduced to very small cameos like Paul Reubens, Jeff Foxworthy, John Oliver, Kenan Thompson, John Cassier, and a few others. The music by Heitor Pereira does sound somewhat okay, but it's not really all that memorable. Overall, this movie is a shining example of corporate cash-grabbing trash made to make a quick buck due to nostalgia. This film is a slap in the face to those who enjoyed the original comics and the cartoon series. Just do yourself a favor and skip this smurfing piece of Smurf. Oh, great, now I'm speaking in Smurf. As for my thoughts on the 2013 sequel, The Smurfs 2, I haven't seen it. But after going through the insult that was the first movie, I'm definitely not planning to. In the movie The Smurfs, 2011 movie, a man named Patrick Winslow is employed by a women's cosmetic and fragrance company to run ad campaigns. In The Smurfs the movie, the character of Patrick Winslow is played by actor Neil Patrick Harris. The character's work supervisor is played by actress Sofia Vergara. In The Smurfs the movie, Patrick Winslow is a little on edge at many times when it comes to his work. Patrick snaps at his pregnant wife, Grace Winslow, played by actress Jayma Mays, a few times, and it just seems so rude. Patrick eventually manages to successfully launch a once-in-a-blue-moon type of ad campaign that his supervisor and the people that she is trying to impress really appreciate. But before all that happens, he meets the Smurfs. Ladies and gents, that since my Batman film review marathon went down so well that I'd look into doing another one. So the one that I'm thinking about doing, I'm only doing the 3 recent films, just because if I did all 4 feature films, I'd start to get bored and go insane. And so to start of hopefully this mini marathon, a film none have wanted made by a director. We know we don't want 2011's The Smurfs. Enjoy, everyone. The plot of the movie is Papa Smurf, Smurfette, Clumsy Smurf, Brainy Smurf, Gutsy Smurf, and Grouchy Smurf suddenly found themselves in the middle of New York City being chased by arch-nemesis Gargamel and his cat Azrael, and the Smurfs must find a way back home before it's too late. This plot is every child fantasy movie rolled into one, and top of that, the Smurfs themselves don't even play that big of a role in the film. Doing the voices for some of the Smurfs are Jonathan Winters as Papa Smurf and singer Katy Perry as Smurfette. Also doing voices for the film are the late Anton Yelchin as Clumsy Smurf, Fred Armisen as Brainy Smurf, Alan Cumming as Gutsy Smurf, George Lopez as Grouchy Smurf, and Frank Welker as Azrael. In all honesty, the voice acting in the film isn't that bad, but the issue is it's that good, either it's just okay at best. Starring as the human characters, we have Hank Azaria as Gargamel and Neil Patrick Harris as Patrick Pat Winslow. Also starring as the human characters are Jayma Mays as Grace Winslow, Sofia Vergara as Odile Angelou, and Tim Gunn as Henry. Honestly, the acting from the live-action actors isn't much better than the acting from the voice actors, which is a shame because both sets of actors are clearly trying, but they just can't make this script work. Since this is a live-action/CGI hybrid, that does mean that we have to talk about the animation, which wasn't brought to us by an animation company, but instead it was brought to us by effects company Framestore, with Tippett Studio doing the animation for Azrael. Now, the animation on the Smurfs isn't that bad. It looks like the kind of thing that you'd see in a live-action/CGI hybrid film, which is honestly the best thing that I can say about the animation. Since when Azrael goes fully animated, man, does it look bad. And I don't just mean like kids' film bad. No, I mean it looks laughably bad, which is a shame because they actually did use a live-action cat for a lot of the scenes in the film. So why they chose have the character be animated in only a few scenes is truly beyond me, since it doesn't look at all. In fact, you can actually tell when it's being fully animated because of how fake it looks. Plot. While chasing down the Smurfs in an attempt to steal their magical essence, the evil wizard Gargamel, Hank Azaria, and a handful of Smurfs accidentally open a portal that magically whisks them away to New York City. After befriending a human couple, the Smurfs try and get back to Smurf Village with Gargamel still on their tail. I was going to start out my review by saying Smurf this movie, but then I realized I had more self-respect for myself. So how many times do people say the word Smurf in this film? Let me put it this way. If the word Smurf was the word of the day on Pee-wee's Playhouse, and they were sitting around watching this movie, every television in the country would explode. It's Smurf overload. But to the film's credit, they at least recognize how ridiculously overused the word is. And besides them using Smurf in every line of dialogue, this actually isn't a terrible film. But make no mistake, it's not good either. The first act is pretty rough. It's typical kids' movie cliché BS. We get Smurfs bumbling around and knocking things over, plenty of toilet humor, and the Smurfs are even named after their personalities like Clumsy, Greedy, and Jokey. Wow. Talk about a loophole to avoid any effort to create character development. They are just given names. Narrator Smurf was kind of clever, though. The film is painfully repetitive. I would say two-thirds of this movie is nothing but chase scenes, and they all end the same way. The Smurfs barely get away as Gargamel crashes into various walls. Yay. Once the Smurfs come into contact with the Winslow couple, played by Neil Patrick Harris and Jayma Mays, Glee, it's surprisingly tolerable. All the human actors are putting in a good effort, especially Hank Azaria as Gargamel, who's actually pretty funny. He has a good back-and-forth banter with his cat Azrael. Even though he's the paint-by-numbers kid villain who endures countless barrages of physical comedy, Azaria makes it work. He also has a few good scenes with Sofia Vergara, Modern Family, and I can't help but admit the Smurfs are genuinely likable. They never get too annoying and have a good dynamic with each other. The voice acting all around is pretty solid. Even George Lopez as Grouchy Smurf steps it up. Katy Perry also puts in a strong effort as Smurfette, even though she's forced to say, "I kissed a Smurf and I liked it." That was unfortunate. I feel bad for Smurfette. She's the only female Smurf in the entire village, and I have to think that will turn her into an evil Smurf at some point, as I would imagine she's constantly hit on by hundreds of Smurfs every day. There's a tendency to have a lot of bad dance sequences in these movies, but there's really only one where the Smurfs rock out to Guitar Hero with Neil Patrick Harris. The Smurfs are basically winking at the camera during this. I feel like this was an annoying commercial for Guitar Hero, but that's kind of unnecessary as everyone already owns it. This is a run-of-the-mill kids movie that does nothing special. Do you think the male protagonist will hate the Smurfs at first, but eventually learn something from them? Yeah, this isn't very complex. But in terms of a kids movie, it's harmless. There's minimal toilet humor, it never gets too gross, and is perfectly tolerable for adults. If your kid is dragging you to this movie, you'll be fine. With all these Smurf personalities, though, it does make me wonder whether there's a more adult Smurf village on the other side of town that has Stone Smurf, Manic Depressive Smurf, and Unemployed Smurf. I don't know. I guess that will be the sequel. In the late 1950s, a cartoonist in Belgium by the name of Peyo made a comic strip that featured small blue creatures. When the United States of America caught a glimpse of these comic strips from Belgium, American newspapers translated the strips and called the little blue creatures Smurfs. Then, in the early 1980s, animation pioneers William Hanna and Joseph Barbera brought the Smurfs to American television, where it became a huge success. Then, in 1983, we got a Smurfs movie entitled The Smurfs and the Magic Flute, where it became a huge success. Now, with the age of computers, Hollywood has delivered a more digital version of the cartoon in a movie simply known as The Smurfs. How does it look and hold up to the original creations of Peyo? Not smurfing much. The movie is a really bad mix between live action and animation that's sure to please kids, but not so much adults. Hollywood tries to make a modern Smurfs movie, but fails miserably. The plot of the movie centers on the title characters known as the Smurfs. The leader of the Smurfs is Papa Smurf, Jonathan Winters, who looks like a blue Santa Claus, and he must keep things in balance at the time for the Festival of the Blue Moon. But the evil wizard Gargamel, Hank Azaria, tries to capture these Smurfs for their magical power. Luckily, some of the Smurfs, including Grumpy Smurf, Brainy Smurf, Gutsy Smurf, Clumsy Smurf, and Smurfette, the only female Smurf, escape Gargamel and they fall through a portal that lands them in New York City. Here, the Smurfs meet Patrick Winslow, Neil Patrick Harris, and with him, the Smurfs must try to find a way home. Also, Gargamel comes through the portal with his cat Azrael, Frank Welker, to try and catch the Smurfs to let his evil plan fall through. The Smurfs is not a terrible film, but it is just bad. The movie fails at almost every level. While I was watching the film, I found several mistakes that made the movie almost very hard to sit through. The first problem I had with the movie was that the story was wretched. We've seen the scenario done better in other films, mainly time travel movies, where the main group of characters are from one time period and end up in the future. Now, Hollywood is doing this with the Smurfs? You've got to be kidding me. The second problem that I had with the film is that the casting was just poor. For the live-action part, Neil Patrick Harris was not convincing and not believable as the main lead human character. For the animation segments, George Lopez and Katy Perry did not fit their roles as Grumpy Smurf and Smurfette. In fact, the writers of this film actually managed to sneak in a line from one Katy Perry's songs, I Kissed a Girl, making an obvious pop culture reference that we do not need. The third problem that I had with the film is that if you look at the animation done on the Smurfs on a TV, it looks pretty good. But when see the animation on the big screen, it looks kind of creepy. In fact, Raja Gosnell, the director behind 2002's Scooby-Doo adaptation and its squeal Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, could have done a better job at directing this movie. But my main problem with the film is the pacing. At 1 hour and 33 minutes, the movie felt very quick and almost jumbled in some areas. This holds true especially at the middle of the film. The Smurfs had a serious editing problem. If the movie had been shortened by 10 minutes, then it would have worked. Speaking of things working, is there anything that I liked about the movie? Well, I did enjoy the opening scene showcasing the Smurf village. I also liked Jonathan Winter's performance of Papa Smurf, being that his was the most believable of all the Smurfs. But the big positive note that made the movie work was Hank Azaria's performance as Gargamel. His acting in this movie was bad, no doubt about that, but it was so funny to watch you can't help but laugh at it. Other than that, the Smurfs really has nothing going for it. Overall, the Smurfs is a poor effort from Hollywood to cash in on a valuable franchise. To me, there wasn't enough potential to keep me interested. As far as summer movies go, this one smurfed up big time. The definition of PG is, some material may not be suitable for children under 10, and I'd pretty much agree. There is some violence, Gargamel can frequently be scary, and the Smurfs are often in danger. For the most part, I'd say the film is fine for kids age 5 and older, depending on their previous movie experience. The substitution of the word smurf as a verb in potentially inappropriate ways, I'm done smurfing around, etc., will be lost on most younger kids. By Mary McCarthy, editor. I was in grade school and high school during the whole Smurf phenomenon in the 80s. So yeah, I remember their basic storyline, but it's been a while. I was eager to find out how the 3 apples high blue guys would translate to the big screen and 3D animation. It takes a few minutes to get past their overly digitized blue Shrek appearance versus the low-tech 80s animation we were used to as kids. Next, you have to embrace the idea of Gargamel as a human, which technically he is in the 80s TV series, though he still appears animated to viewers. The story is that Gargamel enters the delightful mushroomy Smurf village, smashing stuff and trying to catch them. A magic portal to where else New York City is accidentally created, through which the villain, his cat, and 6 Smurfs, Papa, Smurfette, Brainy, Clumsy, Grouchy, and Gutsy, are transported. So now the Smurfs are in the real world, especially the worlds of advertising executive Patrick Winslow, Neil Patrick Harris, who has great physicality for the role and manages not to look completely dorky when hugging a Smurf, and his wife Grace, Jayma Mays, who maintains her wide-eyed mall cop cuteness. Conflict comes in the form of Patrick's boss Odile, played perfectly villainously by Sofia Vergara, and of course Gargamel, trying to catch Smurfs. Commence action scenes, insert predictable, lazily written plotline ending, and poof! You've got yourself a mediocre summer film to take the kids when it's too hot outside and you have nothing better to do. Hank Azaria does a decent job as Gargamel. One of his early lines, where Papa Smurf lives with his 99 sons and 1 daughter, nothing weird about that, gave me hope his character would be sarcastic and fun the whole time. But his success with voices on The Simpsons doesn't completely transfer to the big screen. He often thinks he's funnier than he is, and his timing is often awkward. But he has some genuinely funny moments that will keep the kids from being too scared of him and does have a nice villain cartoonishness about him. His cat Azrael is way over-digitized, Garfield on steroids, but the kids are used to that these days, so the youngsters in the audience always laughed when he appeared. The funny cat helped temper Gargamel's scariness. Director Raja Gosnell pays homage to Smurf creator Peyo and his original Les Schtroumpfs comic creation of the 1950s. 3D animation, for a change, is used well a number of times throughout the film versus simply being used as a tool to make more money on movie tickets. I learned something in the film. Did you know Smurfette was created by Gargamel to try to trap Smurfs? Weird. Anywho, where she was openly flirty back in the day, she is now sort of boring and, voiced by Katy Perry, actually utters the words, "I kissed a Smurf and I liked it." I was thinking she maybe meant Sassette, her ginger-haired gal pal from the original series. And another enthusiastic line of hers is, "I've never had a girlfriend before." Looks like the Smurf boys may not have much of a chance with her, and mostly in the film she is sort of useless and just cares about getting a new dress in NYC. Yawn, Smurfette. They should have let her save a Smurf or something. Perhaps needless to say, the most fun part of the movie for 80s parents bringing kids who barely know what a Smurf is, beyond the commercials they've been seeing lately, is how far the scriptwriters will go in using the word Smurf in a clandestinely vulgar way. Kids will love the, "all right, who Smurfed" fart joke, but I definitely snickered at things like how the Smurfs didn't miss passive-aggressive Smurf, prepare to get Smurfed, and up a Smurfin' Creek without a paddle. The Smurfs has a few things going for it that make it fun and entertaining. First, the acting and voice work of the film gives the movie a lot of depth. Neil Patrick Harris, who plays Patrick Winslow, showed off his ability to play the role of a casual businessman who is stressed and nervous. However, instead of him being that clever, funny jerk that he seems to play at Nime nowadays, Harris specializes in good, humored situational comedy, and timed dialogue. Fans of M. Pillsbury from Glee will be happy to see the same character type in this movie. JMA May plays her typical cute role as Patrick's wife. Grace, however, the main actor to talk about is Hank Aria, who plays Garl. He plays the bumbling wizard to a T-naive, loud, and incredibly silly without trying to be silly. His backfires combined with his cat's reactions to his failed attempts at capturing the Smurfs will have you laughing out loud. The voice casting was also well done, each character being matched with a voice that represented the trait of the Smuff. The sage and wise Papa Smuff had the calm, wisdom-filled mentor-like voice of Jonathan Winters. The irritated and often an annoyed, grouchy Smuff had the rough and scratchy voice of George Lopez, whose complaining comedy really added zest to the character, and the bubbly and sometimes airhead Smurfette had the high-pitched and carefree tone of Katy Perry, who surprised me with her voice acting. The other voice work is matched nearly as well to the other Smurfs, but these three were the standouts. The pace of the movie fast fun, and having nearly no slow points whatsoever is another plus. Director Roger Gazelle filled the Smurfs with a lot of silly absurdity, chase scenes, and clever uses of the environment to keep the movie exciting and fun. That's not to say some of the situations don't seem repetitive, but Gaz now works to overcome by integrating new ideas into the situations to keep it feeling fresh. The catchy music and great orchestral work also combine to make the scenes more enjoyable. Surprisingly, the character development and the amount of connections between the characters were well done too. The Screen R&G team of J. David Stem, David N. Weiss, Jay Garrick, and David Ron took the time to flesh out all the personalities, and it pays off. There is emotional impact that hits close to home, watching Grace encouraging clumsy Smuff, Papa Smuff giving advice to Patrick, or clumsy Smuff trying to prove himself to the others. As for the negative, well, that mainly comes at the expense of older audience members. As I mentioned repeatedly, this movie is very silly and totally geared to the youth demographic. It has little to no mature comedy, and if you didn't like Alvin and the Chipmunks or couldn't get into the Muppet Show, although the upcoming Muppet feature looks to cater to an older viewers, then this movie is not for you. The Smurfs is a blast from the past, packed with lighthearted action laughs and heartwarming moments. Parents looking for a film to watch with their children will do well with this. Actually, with the combination of a great voice cast, a fast pace, and a diverse set characters, audience members of all ages should do well with it too. Extra information, the Smurfs is so smurfing, sweet that you'll want a smying puke all over the smying place. I'm not going to make excuses. I knew exactly what I was getting myself into when I made the conscious decision to go siege the Smurfs. Somehow I deluded myself into thinking that it might be fun and even kind of subversive if handled right after all. I loved the Smurfs as a child. I watched the cartoon soon. I had this sing-along record that I absolutely adored called the Smurfs All-Star Show. And I'm pretty sure that I had a Smurfs pillowcase. The point I'm trying to make is that I've had a special place in my heart for those little blue for most of my adolescent and adult life. Yeah, that's gone now, just poof. Disappeared, vanished into thin air. Any residual nostalgia, any fond lingering memoirs are just that, memories. Thanks a lot, Smurfs. Thank you for killing yet another treasured piece of my youth. I'll bury that right next to G. Joe. Transformers, Santa Claus, and Daredevil the Smurfs is exactly as bad as most have done. You, at least those of you out there capable of rational thought, expected it to be, the basics. Smurfs, the brainchild of Belgian drug user Pew, are 3 apples high, inhabit a magical forest, and live in giant psychedelic mushroom houses. There are 99 dude Smurfs and only 1 woman, which is creepy. All of them, except Smurfette, the lone lady, and Papa the patriarch, are named after their dominant personality trait, greedy. Smuff, vanity. Smuff, passive-aggressive. Smuff, not making that one up. Incontinent. Smuff, that one I did make up. You get the idea. They are hunted by a crazed, incompetent wizard named Gargamel, who wants to steal the Smith's essence, which will give him great power in this story. Everything is patchy, keen, and Smuff Village. Gargamel, played with over-the-top glee by Hank. Area is an idiot and easily fooled, but oh no, Papa Smuff, voiced by Jonathan Winters, who I legitimately thought was dead, has a Smith apocalyptic vision that clumsy Smuff Anton Yellen inadvertently helps create, clumsy being. Well, the clumsy one smurfs up and leads the evil wizard right to Smuff Village through a series of events. You don't give a smuff about 6 Smurfs, Papa, Clumsy Smurfette, Katie, Perry Brainy, Fred Armisen, Grouchy George Lopez, and Gutsy Alan Cumming get sucked through a magical hole and wind up in New York City. There they meet Patrick Winslow, Neil Patrick Harris, and his pregnant wife, Grace Jamaz. Patrick is a middle management type advertising exec at a cosmetics firm, and he has a chance to make it to the big time, if only he can get this ad campaign done on time, as you can imagine. The Smurfs throw a monkey wrench into his plans. Gargamel teams up with Patrick's shark of a boss, Odal Sophia Verara, and Patrick has to help the Smurfs get home, save his job, and keep his wife from realizing that he's a complete smurfing tool. Of course, along the way, the Smurfs are going to teach Patrick a thing or two about what is really important in life, like love. Friends, loved ones, hugging and kissing and love, did I mention that? And cuddle, and puppy dogs, and moonbeams. And like I said, if you do get dragged to this, bring a barf bag because you're going to need it by the end. It's so sickly sweet, it's like power chugging Kool-Aid cut with chocolate syrup. Obviously, the Smurfs is aimed at children. You'll be amazed how many times little blue dudes stabbing a wizard in the ass can make a child laugh. But it also attempts to be one of those kids' movies that adults will like to. There is the constant use of the word smuff in place of curse words, but the intent is readily apparent. It's like swearing by proxy and without any of the impact of proper profanity, and let me see, there are references to Lethal Weapon. Papa is too old for this smuff Braveheart, Brokeback Mountain, and Midnight Cowboy, as well as an MMA joke and an joke you'll also cringe when the Smuff crew with NPH shredding on the axe reenact Walk This Way by Run DMC. Yep, that happens. It is not okay. But outside of a few jokes and asides, the Smurfs doesn't do anything to play with conventions or actually make the movie anything but stale. The plot plays out, exactly like you know it will, down to Clumsy's accident that puts Patrick's job in jeopardy, but that we know in advance will ultimately benefit him. The story is so incredibly by the book, it feels like they wrote the script on the spot while filming. One of the most curious elements of the Smurfs 3D is the weird fatherly bonding between Papa, Smuff, and soon-to-be Father Patrick, who spends a fair amount of his time in a CBGB t-shirt, which is a strange juxtapose. You get the distinct impression that Patrick doesn't want to be a father, and I suspect he has considered trying to escape through some magical whirling hole of his own, but Papa ain't having none of that. He schools Patrick proper, until he's stoked that he's about to have a rug rat running around smearing crap into the carpet, yanking on his basset hound's ears like he didn't make a horrible mistake. The Smurfs is a constant bubbly stream of positive affirmations. Jesus, you're good enough, just the war encouragement and reminders that you really should believe in yourself, above all things. It is the most oversimplified single-note message you'll ever see in a movie. Sure, I feel like a dick trashing a kid's movie, but damn, even as a child, I would have seen through this nonsense with creatively middling, financially prosperous live-action SLCGI amalgamations already created for Scooby-Doo, Garfield, Alvin and the Chipmunks, and Yogi Bear. It was only a matter of time before Hollywood dusted off the Smurfs property based on a 1958 comic strip by Pooh and a subsequent 1980s Hanna-Barbera cartoon series. The film to be as kind as possible did not look promising based on the obnoxious lowest common denominator trailers and television ads. To be more blunt, it looked wretched. Yet another miserable excuse for a family movie that took a well-loved, in some circles, at least franchise, and turned it into a disingenuous, faux, hip pop culture-obsessed shadow of its former self, having director Raja Gosnell 2008's Beverly Hills Chihuahua in The Driver's One, Seat and writers J. David Stern and David N. Weiss 2007's Daddy Day Camp, and Jarek and David Ron 2011's Zookeeper behind the script. Pages didn't exactly alleviate fears, much like the deceptively resourceful little blue guys of the title. However, it's wise to never judge a book or a film by its cover. The Smurfs won't be an awards contender anytime soon, but it is altogether sweetly Smurfier than anyone could have predicted. In a magical forest sits the peaceful, loving community of Smuff Village, and in Smuff Village lives the mythical blue Smurfs, each one no more than 3 apples high as they cheerfully prepare for the festival of the blue moon. Evil wizard Gargamel Hank, Azaria, and his long-suffering feline henchman, Azel, prepare to swoop in and steal the Smurfs' essence. The one thing with the ability to make Gargamel mighty and powerful, heading in the wrong direction as they flee through the woods. Several of the Smurfs, among them Papa, voiced by Jonathan Winters, Clumsy Anton Yellen, Gutsy Alan, Grouchy George, Lopez, and lone female Smurfette Katy Perry find themselves sucked into a watery vortex that spits them out in New York City Central Park. Hot on their heels are Gargamel and Azrael, all of the above-decided fish out of water in the real world, as Papa tries to figure out a way to return home. The Smurfs take up residence with human couple, Patrick Neal, Patrick Harris, and pregnant Grace JMA May, who are understandably shocked by the appearance of tiny blue people in their apartment. Patrick is stressed out as it is his promotion to VP of Marketing at cosmetics company. Angelo is on the line if he doesn't wow his boss O'Dall, Sofia Vergara, with a knockout ad campaign, but it is in his friendship with the Smurfs that he's about to learn some valuable life lessons about what it means to be true to yourself and a good father. There are no two ways about it. Kids will adore the Smurfs, and adults will be nostalgically transported back to their own childhoods, reminded of the kinds of warm, adventurous films they used to love in the 1970s and 80s. Director Raja Gosnell cannot resist a few needless, predictable flourishes, occasional potty humor, a rock song. Sing along countless double entendres involving all forms of the word smuff. But beyond that is an unexpectedly gentle, valiant comedy with plenty of worthwhile messages to send out to younger viewers, a less consistently witty but still pleasing takeoff of 2017's Enchanted, also about fairy tale characters ending up in modern-day Manhattan. The film's plot is simple and straightforward. Its pacing, unassumingly nimble for running a lengthy 103 minutes. Neil Patrick Harris, 2011's Beastly, and JMA Ma 2009's Paul Blart Mop are game participants, even as they must act most of their scenes opposite invisible creatures. Added in post-production, their interactions with the Smurfs aren't seamless. When the humans hold them, it still looks like they're cupping the air. But the CGI effects are otherwise detailed and attractive, their cartoonishness part of their charm, as Patrick and Grace, loving, married, put upon by approaching parenthood and work demands. Harris and Mays get more to do than the average human performers typically receive in this sort of movie, as Odell, Patrick's imperious boss, Sofia Vergara, 2005's Lords of Dogtown, nicely twists expectations by proving to have a heart behind her tough, all-business exterior. The Smurfs, meanwhile, are adorable in their innocent goodness, with Jonathan Winters wise and lived in as the voice of Papa Anton Yellen 2011's The Beaver, well cast as the underappreciated Clumsy, and musician Katy Perry, endearing and fun as Smurfette, who delights in having her very first gal pal in Grace Shore. The Smurfs are square, They never miss an opportunity to belt out their theme song or throw Smurf into the conversation, as in We're Up a Smurfing Creek Without a Paddle, but that makes them all the more lovable. Best of all, though, is Hank Area 2009's Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian, disappearing behind the balding scalp, bulbous nose, and waving cloaks of one of the best live-action bad guys in recent years, like a great animated Disney villain who has jumped clear off the page. For another comparison, think a cross between the peculiar Purple Pie Man from Strawberry Shortcake and Hermione Gingold's Pancake, which from 1969's Winter of the Witch aria has a field day with Gargamel perfectly combining a comic side with a quirky off-kilter creepiness. With the forever toss about Azrael by his side, Gargamel is both bumbling and threatening in one scene, confusing a homeless man for a fellow sorcerer, and in another, going out of his way to walk through the steam coming up from New York City sewer grates. I love emerging dramatically through the smoke, he exclaims with a mischievous grin. It makes me feel so deliciously mysterious as the Smurfs sit around Patrick's and Grace's apartment late one night, reminiscing about home and the people they've left behind. Smurfette remarks, "You know who I don't miss, passive-aggressive Smurf. He always makes you feel so bad about yourself skirting the off-color line without becoming inappropriate. It's this little extra effort, not only in the writing, but on all fronts, that lifts the Smurfs above the comparatively uninspired level of it's like styled cinematic ilk. The more overt slapstick comedy rarely works, but it's the tricky wordplay, the energetic go-getter tone, and a special mindfulness toward compassion and sincerity that iron out the problem areas through his friendships with the Smurfs. Patrick is reassured about becoming a father, standing up for what he believes in, and recognizing how special Grace is to him. On the Smurf side, they learn what it means to embrace teamwork and to cherish each other for their talents, rather than get hung up on whatever their weak spots might be. As for Gargamel, well, he wishes he could quit Azrael. The Smurfs is breezily winning a whimsical blend of silliness and morality with an honest goodness vision to go along with its gimmicky name value. This film, directed by Braz, screenplay by J. David Stem. David M. Weiss, J. Scar, David Ron Story by J. David Stem, David M. Weiss, produced by Jordan Kerner, starring Neil Patrick Harris, Tim A.E., Sofia Vargar, Hank Area. Cinematography, Phil Mew, edited by Sabrina Plisco, music by Ader Pereira. Production companies, Columbia Pictures, Sony Pictures Animation, the Kerner Entertainment Company, distributed by Sony Pictures, release states: June 16, 2011 in J. Kerr, July 29, 2011 in United States, running time 103 minutes, country United States, language English. Budget $110 million, box office $537 million. So guys, this is the review of the Smurfs movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.